LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga has been a long time coming. After initially being revealed back at E3 in 2019 and slated for release in 2020, the Skywalker Saga faced countless delays. It's abundantly clear that Traveller's Tales were a studio that were hit especially hard by COVID and the switch over to working from home, and I'm sure that's the main reason the game's release date kept slipping over the past 2 years. But I think another reason is because of just how ambitious the Skywalker Saga is in terms of scope. This game is massive. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga takes you through the story of all 9 numbered Star Wars movies, while also letting you freely explore dozens of iconic planets from across the franchise as literally hundreds of different playable characters. As a big Star Wars fan, I couldn't help but be enamoured by everything there was to see and do in this game. But while its scope is impressive, and there's clearly been a lot of love and care put into this game to ensure that it feels like an authentic recreation of the Star Wars universe, there are times where it feels like Traveller's Tales have sacrificed quality for quantity with the Skywalker Saga. Before I fully dive into the review, I want to start off by saying how refreshing it was to play through a game that lets you see every Star Wars movie through such a fun and non-cynical lens. It's clear that the Skywalker Saga was developed by a team comprised of people who have a lot of love for all 3 Star Wars trilogies. Sometimes it feels like people can't see the forest for the trees with Star Wars and get bogged down in negativity and focusing on the things they don't like in the Star Wars movies rather than taking a step back and just appreciating the huge, rich universe these movies have provided us with. Between the movies, TV shows, games, books, and comics, there's an almost insurmountable amount of great Star Wars stories to explore. I don't think there's any other media franchise that's a better fit for video game adaptations than Star Wars. The lightsaber duels, the force powers, and the spaceship battles all lend themselves perfectly to video games. And at its core, LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is all about marrying the most exciting elements of Star Wars into one big game. And while this does mean that some aspects of the gameplay end up less developed than others, the team at Traveller's Tales have fortunately put a lot of their focus into getting the most important things right, with flight segments and combat being leagues better than they were in any prior LEGO game. When you boot up LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, you're greeted with one of the most impressive opening cinematics I've ever seen in a game. It features some of the biggest moments from all 9 films translated beautifully into LEGO form, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that it literally gave me chills the first time I saw it. This video is sure to bring a smile to the face of even the most jaded Star Wars fan. While you can't just jump into any episode right off the bat like you could in prior LEGO Star Wars games, you are able to start with the first episode of any of the 3 trilogies. I decided to play through the movies in chronological order and started with the prequels, and I think that's a good way to experience the Skywalker Saga, as there are new mechanics introduced in each of the trilogies that carry over to the next. While the original trilogy will always be my favourite, and therefore I think I enjoyed playing through it the most here, I enjoy the vast majority of Star Wars movies to varying degrees, and I had a great time playing through every movie here. In fact, there were arguably a couple of movies I enjoyed more here than I did watching them. Ironically, while Episode 2 is far and away my least favourite Star Wars movie, it was one of the episodes I had the most fun with in the Skywalker Saga. From the chase at the beginning, to the fight between Obi-Wan and Jango Fett, to the massive final battle on Geonosis, Episode 2 as a whole feels perfectly suited to being adapted into a video game. You can tell that Traveller's Tales have put a lot of effort into making the biggest and most iconic moments of each movie as exciting and faithful to the films as possible, while also throwing in a good sprinkling of LEGO humour to make the moments their own. One of the first things you'll no doubt notice when playing the Skywalker Saga is that the camera angle has been adjusted from prior LEGO games to be a lot tighter. While the camera in other LEGO games is placed more overhead, the camera here is placed right behind your character, which makes the Skywalker Saga feel much more like a traditional third-person action game than any of the previous LEGO games did. Combat is the aspect that's been improved the most drastically over prior LEGO games in the Skywalker Saga. The combat mechanics here, while not the deepest you'll ever see in a game, are still far deeper and more robust than anything you'd expect to find in a LEGO game. Of course, with this being a game that retells the story of the Skywalker Saga, you can expect to spend a lot of time playing as characters that wield lightsabers, which is good news as the Jedi and Sith characters are by far the most fun to play as. Throwing your lightsaber at an enemy or using your lightsaber to deflect a stormtrooper's blaster bolt right back at them is incredibly satisfying. Though let's be real, lightsabers are awesome, so they're nearly always fun to use in a video game no matter what. But the way LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga lets you string combos together and juggle enemies in the air makes fighting with a lightsaber feel vastly better than it ever did in the older LEGO Star Wars games. I also very much appreciated that you can draw or sheath your lightsaber at all times by pressing circle. I don't know why I always find this so cool in games, but both here and in Ghost of Tsushima, I found myself manually drawing my weapon constantly just because of how cool it looks. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga's combat shines the brightest during lightsaber duels. The series' most iconic lightsaber fights are masterfully brought to life in LEGO form in the Skywalker Saga's epic boss battles. These big set-piece fights are easily my favourite part of the Skywalker Saga's campaign. Even before you've played it, you can probably guess what fights are going to be the high points of this game, with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan's battle with Maul, Obi-Wan and Anakin's showdown on Mustafar, both Luke vs Vader fights, The Last Jedi's throne room sequence, and Rey and Kylo's duel atop the remnants of the Death Star, all being beautifully recreated here. Of course, there are plenty of characters throughout the Star Wars universe who don't have lightsabers, and they can also hold their own in combat just fine. While these characters can still use melee attacks, the vast majority of non-Force users wield some kind of blaster, with LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga bringing back the cover-based shooting from LEGO Force Awakens. And for a game that's not a shooter, the gunplay here is surprisingly serviceable, controlling a little more like a standard third-person shooter than you might expect. With an obscenely large roster of over 380 playable characters, you'll never be at a loss for new characters to try out in LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. If there's a character you can think of in the Star Wars films, be it a main character, supporting character, or even a background character, there's a very good chance you can play as them in this game. To help organise its gargantuan lineup of characters, the Skywalker Saga breaks its characters down into different classes, so you can easily sort through the character selection screen and find who you're looking for. Classes range from Jedi to Scoundrel to Bounty Hunter to Droid, with each class having their own unique abilities that'll let them access objects and locations that other classes can't. Some barriers need a lightsaber to cut through, some objects can only be interacted with when you're playing as a dark side Force user, silver bricks can only be destroyed by a character with explosives, while gold bricks can only be melted by someone with a laser weapon. A touch that I love is that while you're exploring the open world, you'll encounter all kinds of alien species with their own languages. And because they aren't speaking basic, your normal characters often can't understand what they're saying, so you'll need to switch to a protocol droid like C-3PO who can help translate what they're saying for you. As you explore the countless locations the Skywalker Saga has to offer, you'll find yourself constantly stumbling across Kyber bricks, which can be spent on unlocking new abilities across several different skill trees. Like combat, the skill trees in the Skywalker Saga are far more expansive than I would have expected. There's an overarching skill tree that'll benefit every character in the game by offering things like increased health, faster movement speed, and the ability to highlight collectibles in the environment, but there's also specific skill trees for all of the different character archetypes. So needless to say, it'll take a very committed player to max out all the different skill trees. Whether you're flying around the open world collecting Kyber bricks or recreating the epic space battles of the movies, flight and dogfighting feel great, and seeing the objects you shoot shatter into hundreds of tiny Lego bricks is very gratifying. Obviously, with the Skywalker Saga being a family game at its core, the game's flight mechanics are a lot more arcadey and accessible than something like Star Wars Squadrons or even Battlefront, but I think that's to its benefit. There's such a fine line between having depth and being convoluted with flight mechanics in games for me, so leaning on the more arcadey side is always my preference anyway. I'm glad to say that just like the lightsaber duels, the series' most iconic vehicle sequences are shown as much love as you'd hope. I still think the original trilogy has the most memorable flight set pieces, so it's only fitting that these scenes are also the best flight sequences in LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, with the Death Star trench run and binding the legs of the AT-ATs during the Battle of Hoth being particular highlights. The ground-based vehicle sections are also treated with just as much respect, so yes, the speeder bike chase on Endor is as cool as you'd hope. And there's some undeniable spectacle to the pod racing mission, even if its loose feeling controls mean it can't hold a candle to Episode 1 Racer. As I mentioned earlier, if you play through the levels in chronological order, you'll notice that each trilogy introduces new mechanics that transfer over to the next trilogy. For example, the Ewoks that you play as in the Return of the Jedi levels have the ability to craft different gadgets and gizmos out of scraps that they find in the environment, which is an ability that Rey also has in the levels inspired by the sequel trilogy, while the sequel trilogy levels introduce some light stealth mechanics where you can sneak around areas like Starkiller Base, knocking out guards from behind before they see you. Because of this, I think that playing episodes 1 through 9 in order is the best way to experience the Skywalker Saga. Where LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga starts to fall apart is the segments between the big set piece moments. The level design feels very similar to the previous LEGO games, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel a bit antiquated at this point. You'll run around a level, smashing your way through waves of mindless enemies, and solving the same non-puzzles that have persisted throughout all the LEGO games that exist only to slow you down without making you think at all. Most of the puzzles in the Skywalker Saga are almost identical to the puzzles you'd find in the older LEGO Star Wars games. You'll be using the Force to move objects around to create new pathways, carving paths through breakable walls with lightsabers, finding parts of Stormtrooper costumes to bypass security checkpoints, performing Jedi mind tricks to take control of the minds of Stormtroopers, forcing them to pull out of reach levers for you, and smashing objects, then reassembling them into whatever item you need to solve the problem at hand. The real shame of it is that there's occasionally a clever puzzle that plays with a concept from one of the movies in an interesting way. The best example of this is the scene in The Last Jedi where Rey sees countless versions of herself reflected in the Mirror Cave. This is a visually stunning sequence in the movie, so it's easy to see why they'd want to find a way to incorporate it into this game. In the Skywalker Saga, this moment plays out as a puzzle where you have to move Rey into the right position so that her reflection is standing on a switch that's inside the mirror. This is a clever little puzzle that actually takes a scene from the movie and twists it into an interesting gameplay gimmick. I just wish there were more moments like this sprinkled throughout the 9 episodes. Main missions in the Skywalker Saga are often very short, but there's a lot to see and do in the open world between them, and you'll often have to complete tasks in the hub towns to progress to the next major story mission. Unfortunately, much of your time between main missions is spent slowly walking from point A to B in towns. In fact, there were multiple points between missions where I was forced to walk somewhere, watch a cutscene, then immediately walk back to where I came from. These sections feel like a colossal waste of time, and they could have been trimmed out entirely without affecting anything in the slightest. They're also a perfect example of the biggest problem I have with the Skywalker Saga, which is that it just doesn't respect your time, and drags everything out for much longer than it needs to. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga has an almost unfathomable amount of content. The LEGO games have always been collectathons, but this game pushes the collectathon formula to a ridiculous new extent. There's 225 mini-kits to find, over 1100 Kyber crystals to collect, 38 races to win, 140 side missions to complete, and 19 data cards to find, each of which will unlock a new cheat. Cheats range from essential buffs like stud multipliers that drastically cut down the grind when collecting studs to purchase new characters and vehicles, to fun little novelties like Big Head Mode. To give you an idea of just how big this game is, a normal LEGO game would take roughly 10 to 15 hours to run through the story, and roughly 30 to 40 hours to 100% it. But platinuming the Skywalker Saga will likely take more than double that amount of time, with the estimated average platinum time being between 70 and 90 hours. And while this level of ambition is commendable, it's also the game's undoing. This is one of those games that simply has too much in it. I've platinumed so many LEGO games over the years, but LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga was the rare LEGO game where I just completely lost steam after finishing it, and realised I had no desire to go for the platinum. By the time I finished the game and spent some time exploring the open world, I was about 25 hours in, and I just couldn't imagine spending another 50 plus hours doing the same thing over and over again. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga just doesn't have enough depth or variety to justify its gargantuan scope. 90 hours is just an egregious amount of time to expect any player to spend with a game this simplistic. While a game like Persona 5 can take over 100 hours to finish, its grand story and deep mechanics can justify that meaty runtime. A LEGO game simply can't. If your game's mechanics don't lend themselves to this kind of scale, don't force it. While I'm well aware that LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is a family game first and foremost, and wasn't expecting any real challenge out of it, I still couldn't help but notice that this game is extremely easy. I understand that this game needs to be accessible for everyone to play, but I feel like the optional challenges specifically could have offered a bit more challenge. I found myself getting a gold medal in every race I encountered on my first attempt with plenty of time still left over. I just wish more developers would take a page out of Nintendo's book. While almost anyone could beat most Mario games, the challenge comes when you try to 100% them, by collecting every hidden coin and beating every secret level. The Star Wars universe is home to countless wonderful and memorable locations, and LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga allows you to freely explore so many of them. There's Hoth, Tatooine, Naboo, Kamino, Bespin, Jakku, Crate, and many, many more. If there's a particular planet that comes to mind when you think about Star Wars, odds are you'll be paying it a visit in LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, meaning there's plenty of locations to geek out about, whether you're an original trilogy, prequels, or sequels fan, or if you're just a Star Wars fan in general who appreciates a little bit of everything. Goofy slapstick humour is something that's been a consistent through line throughout all the LEGO games, so of course you can expect to see jokes galore here. This wacky style of humour feels specifically geared towards kids, which makes sense seeing as they're the target demographic for the LEGO games. While slapstick comedy and silly sight gags don't necessarily appeal to me, I did like the way that LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga plays with iconic lines of dialogue from the movies, and occasionally provides some genuinely funny inside jokes for Star Wars fans. I also very much appreciated the clever names that are given to many of the story missions, with Better Call Maul being a particular favourite of mine. The Skywalker Saga is also extremely self-aware when it comes to the memes that the Star Wars franchise has spawned, so expect plenty of jacked Kylo, traitor, and high ground jokes. From the hum of a lightsaber to the screech of an X-Wing, the Star Wars series has some of the most immediately identifiable sound design in all of film. I mean, we're talking about the franchise that defined what most people think of as the sounds of lasers and spaceships. It's also no secret that the music of Star Wars is untouchable, with John Williams' incredible themes adding so much emotional weight to the movies. So I'm sure it'll come as no surprise when I say that the sound effects and music in the Skywalker Saga are every bit as great as you'd expect out of something with the Star Wars name attached to it. The voiceover in the Skywalker Saga is also stellar, with many of the actors from the Clone Wars and a couple from the films, including Anthony Daniels and Billy D. Williams, reprising their roles here. These performances, combined with the impeccable sound design, go a long way in making LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga feel like an authentic Star Wars experience. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is also a great looking game. There's such an impressive amount of detail in its world and characters. I love that you can even see the little imperfections in the LEGO pieces, like the thin lines in the plastic on characters' hair, where the piece is clearly joined during construction, which helps make the characters look like actual LEGO minifigures. I can't even think of the last time a game left me with as many conflicting feelings as the Skywalker Saga has. While its combat and flight mechanics are leaps and bounds above anything we've seen in prior LEGO games, there are so many other areas where the Skywalker Saga is lacking. Star Wars is an amazing and rich franchise, and to have such a massive celebration of it in video game form is a real treat. It's just a shame that the Skywalker Saga's antiquated level design and repetitious puzzles left me yearning for more. Seeing as this was a video all about Star Wars, I thought I'd take a minute to do something a little bit different and give a quick shout out to a Star Wars book. If you're a Star Wars fan and haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend the recently released novel, Shadow of the Sith. It tells a fantastic story that bridges the gap between the original trilogy and sequel trilogy, and goes a long way to explain some of Episode 9's more questionable story decisions. And hey, just for the hell of it, I'll toss my ranking of all the live-action Star Wars movies and shows at the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a comment. You can find countless other reviews on my channel, including my recent reviews of Ghostwire Tokyo, Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, and Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. And be sure to stay tuned for my upcoming reviews of Iodine Chronicles Rising, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge.